This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Many times when a painting comes into the studio, the work that it requires is quite obvious. Massive tears, overpaint, losses, horrible things that have been done to the painting. But sometimes the work is more nuanced. It's less obvious and perhaps, prima facie, less important. But that's never the case. Anytime a painting needs work, it's important. And on this portrait of a man, we have several dents, areas where the canvas has been poked and scratched and otherwise deformed. Those are distractions that call our attention away from the portrait. There are some small losses in his face and forehead, which again are problematic. But the biggest issue is on the back, where somebody has decided to wax line this canvas with a piece of fiberglass. Now, wax linings are a historic treatment that we don't do in the studio anymore for many reasons, but fiberglass is never an appropriate material for use on a painting. So this is lousy, and this needs to be removed. And even if it doesn't seem like removing this old fiberglass lining is going to change the front of the painting, well, stay tuned. While there is plenty of work to be done on this painting, most of it will not be on the image. Rather, it will be behind the image, on the fundamental structure of the painting itself. And while we always want the image, the show side, to look exquisite, it's critically important that the structure and fundamentals are sound. And whether it's with a painting, with a car, with a house, or with a website, looking good is important, but being functionally sound is critical. And with Squarespace, that's built in. Aside from thousands and thousands of beautiful mobile-friendly templates, Squarespace has real muscle behind that pretty veneer. Because Squarespace has made sure that if and when you're ready to expand your website's functionality, everything is right at your fingertips. Like search engine optimization to find your audience, or e-commerce solutions so you can sell to that audience, and email marketing campaigns to reach people where they are, or online scheduling so they can reach you when they need, integrated shipping so you can get products to your buyers, and a suite of social media tools to maximize your reach. So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Baumgartner to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. The first thing that I'm going to do is separate the painting from its support. There are lots and lots of staples, and the wax is really sticky, but it's really not all that difficult. Using my tack puller, I can get these staples out, even if it's a little bit tedious. Once I've removed all of them, and there were quite a few of them, I can peel back this piece of fiberglass. It's really soft and really flexible because there's no resin in the wax. There's just wax, and this is not how you would historically do a wax resin lining. Now I'm removing the support, and we'll save that. It's fundamentally sound, it's likely original, and it doesn't need to be replaced. But I need to get all of this wax and fiberglass off the back of this canvas for all of the reasons. And so I'm going to take the painting back to the hot table where I've heated it up. And on a piece of release film, I'm just going to place the canvas and let it sit. After about 15 or 20 minutes, I can come back and you can see how the wax layer has become much more opaque. That lets me know that it has softened up. And now I can just start peeling off this layer of fiberglass. The absence of the resin in the wax lining mixture means that this is just wax, and once heated, it melts and it comes right up. The resin is really the critically important part. That's what adds the stickiness and the stiffness. And as we've seen in the past, it's much more difficult to remove. So once again, lousy work is my best friend here. That somebody did a sloppy job in the past has made my job much easier. Once I have the fiberglass off, I can take a palette knife and begin scraping off the wax residue. There is quite a bit of wax on here, and we need to get it off of this canvas because it has no place here anymore. So gliding over the surface very gently so to not damage the canvas, I can remove all of this wax. Now there is still a bit of residue. Of course, the canvas absorbs some of that wax, and that also needs to be removed. But for now, this is the first step. And we can see in the lower left corner, there used to be a big patch where there is now a hole. So this is not the first time this painting has been worked on. Once the majority of the wax has been removed, I can come back with a solvent and some cotton balls and begin removing the residue. Now the wax, when warm and mixed with this solvent, becomes liquidy, and I can lift it off with the cotton balls. It takes a little while and multiple passes to soften up, liquefy, and remove the wax, but it's going according to plan. It's not terribly difficult, and I've done this many, many times. Really, we want to get as much of this wax off of this canvas, out of the canvas, as possible. Using a couple of shop towels afterwards, I'll make, again, multiple passes to lift off any residues that may be remaining. Keeping the table hot ensures that this wax stays soft and melted, which means that I can continue to lift it off with the shop towels. And once I'm done removing the wax, there's still some left in the canvas, so I'm going to use the hot table to extract it. I've replaced the release paper with cotton blotter paper, I've gone around the painting with the cotton webbing, and I've added more solvent to the back. I'll flip it over, I'll tape it down, create the airtight envelope, I'll add the vacuum pump through extractors, I'll turn off the heat, and turn on the vacuum pump. Now, with the table still warm, the wax will be forced down into the blotter paper and out of the canvas, and we will desaturate this canvas. Hopefully one time is enough, but we'll see. As it turns out, only one time on the hot table was all that was needed for this painting, so now I can turn my attention to removing the varnish. Because this painting was conserved not long ago, there isn't really any surface grime, so I don't have to worry about removing that first. After testing the painting and determining the correct solvent mixture, I can begin rolling swabs on the surface and removing that old varnish. Now, spoiler alert, I knew that this area had some overpainting, but I wanted to show just how easily it comes off when it's new. If this overpaint was old, it would be much more difficult. So, I will continue on removing this old varnish and, well, discovering what lies beneath. And surprise, there will be some surprises. While I had seen this painting under UV and revealed all of that old overpainting, seeing how extensive it was still pretty shocking to me. And getting it off revealed a much lighter, much truer background, so I'm glad for that. With the painting now cleaned, we can address the tear, which was the cause of the previous patch, and the fiberglass wax lining. I'm not going to line this painting. It doesn't need it. The canvas is sound and structurally stable, but we do need to add a little bit of support where this little tear was, otherwise it will open up. So, as per usual, because it is a very sound method, it's one that I'm comfortable with, and I've had great results with it, I'm using the bridging technique, whereby I take little strands of Belgian linen, dip them in an adhesive, and then lay them down perpendicularly across the tear. This is much like a butterfly suture a doctor would use. I'm not sewing it into the canvas, I'm just laying it down across the tear. And this is going to help support this tear and prevent it from opening up or moving as humidity changes and the canvas expands and contracts. It's surprising that these little strands of Belgian linen with this little bit of adhesive are that strong, but they are. And so, in between shots of my hair, we can see how the bridging continues. And I'm staggering all of these little strands. One is higher than the next, which is lower, and so on and so forth, so that we have a softer edge. If we kept them all in a line, we could run the risk of telegraphing this to the front of the canvas, and we wouldn't want that. Once they're laid down, I'll put some weights on them, and then come back the next day and remove the weights and make sure that everything went according to plan, which, surprise, surprise, it did. And we have some beautiful bridging that is now holding this tear closed. The other structural work that I need to do is a strip lining. Now, I mentioned I wasn't lining the painting because the canvas was fundamentally sound, but the tacking edges are not. And we need them to be sound so that we can affix this painting to its support. Over time and multiple creases and multiple rounds of tacks or staples, the canvas on the tacking edges can become worn or thin or just kind of lose its structural integrity. And in those cases, we take a piece of adhesive film and iron it down, and then take a piece of 3-inch wide frayed Belgian linen canvas and iron that down and adhere it to the original. The fray is necessary for two reasons. One, to increase the surface area for the adhesive film, so we have a better bond. And two, again, to limit the possibility of telegraphing a crisp edge to the front of the painting. This softer edge can diffuse and we don't get a crisp line on the face. Once the painting has been fully strip-lined, I can come back with the original support and square it up. We need to do this because the support is a little bit loose, and as we go and tack it in, it will distort. The joints will open up, and that would be bad. We would have a painting that wouldn't be square. So once I square up a corner, I take some nails and I drive them into the corner through the joints. Because this is a double-fingered miter joint and it's free-floating, there's no glue or other mechanical fasteners, so we have to add some to hold it together. Once that's done, I can lay the painting down onto the support. I can align it to make sure that it fits and it's oriented correctly, and then I can begin the process of stretching it. Now, of course, I'm not going to be using staples. I'm going to be using sterilized blued steel tacks. These are generally used for upholstery, and they're sterilized because upholsterers will often put them in their mouths and, well, spit tacks. And I've done that before, but for a painting of this size, it's not all that necessary. As I go along and tack the edges, I'm feeling the front of the painting to make sure there are no divots or slack or any other planar distortions. I don't actually need to see this, I can feel it with my hands. I've done it for so many years. Once the painting is fully stretched, I'll remove those nails which held everything square. I will trim off the excess canvas in the corners. I don't want this stuff here. It will bulk up and make it harder to fold the back of the canvas. And then I can begin the cleaning up, which is where I will fold over and tuck in all of this extra canvas and make the back look just as good as the front. Because remember here, most of our attention is on the back, so doing these little things makes a huge difference. It tells the client that we handled this painting with care, not only on the front, but on the back as well. So using some smaller weight tacks, I can go along after I've folded the canvas over and tack them in place. This is my preferred method of doing this. Other people use glue or staples, but I'm not going to do either of those things. And at this point, we should just come to trust that this is how I'm going to do it over and over again. Once I reach the corner, I'll tuck it in, I'll fold it, and I'll overlap it, creating a really strong joint in the area where the canvas is going to be stressed the most when we key out the stretcher. And the keying process is critically important for two reasons. One, it's a way that we can add tension to the canvas. And two, it's a way that we can keep the joints tight. Remember, these are floating joints. There's nothing in them to hold them together. There's a bunch of mortises, and so putting these pieces of wood, these keys in, makes the joint tighter. We can also ensure that the canvas has the proper tension, which keeps planar distortions and other things at bay, which could otherwise harm the painting in the future. And in the future, if the canvas ever gets slack, these keys can be tapped out a little bit more. Once the keys are fully secured into place, I'll come around with my lighter weight tacks, put one in each corner, which will allow me to feed some fishing line through the holes I previously drilled in the keys, and then secure them in place so that they don't get lost. I'm not so concerned about losing them, I'm more concerned about one of them falling in between the stretcher and the canvas and creating a dent. It is now that I can turn my attention back to the front of the painting and begin filling in the losses. Now, we're lucky here that there are not many. There's just a few little nicks and chips and, of course, the losses around the tear. And I'm using a water-based chalk filler, which is easily applied, easily removed, and removable in the future, so if my work ever needs to be done, this will come out fairly simply. Once I've removed all of the excess, which really didn't take much time at all, I can apply the isolation or saturation layer. This painting is really dark, a lot of blacks, a lot of greens, and it's hard to see the colors. They're a little bit washed out right now. And so applying this synthetic resin will allow the painting to saturate up. The colors will get much richer. And this means that when I retouch, I can retouch to these richer colors, which is what the painting will look like when I apply the final varnish. If I skip this, I run the risk of retouching to the washed out colors and then applying the varnish and my retouching not matching. So this is a critically important step. It allows me to do my retouching much, much better. And I'll brush it out to make sure that I have a nice even coating, I'll let it dry, and then we're on to retouching. The retouching wasn't terribly difficult, but I had to make a couple of decisions, particularly in the hair, about how far I was going to go. And ultimately, I decided that I wasn't going to make any editorial decisions because that's not my job as a conservator. My job is to take what's on the painting and make sure it's true to itself. Now, in the future, if everybody decides they want to remove this and change it, my retouching comes off very easily without running risk of damage to the painting, so none of it's permanent. The application of the final varnish does a couple of things. It protects the painting from ultraviolet light and from handling, oils, fingerprints, dust, and dirt, but it also allows me to change the sheen. And here I want something that's got a really velvety, semi-gloss look to it. Not too shiny, but not dull at all, because I want this fellow to look as good as he thinks he does. And so here is the final painting. Really, it looks much like itself, much like it did, but better. We can see more of the detail in his coat. The background is much cleaner and freer of all of that overpaint. The tear is gone, the hole is gone. Everything just looks like it should. It doesn't look like there's been any work done to this painting, which, that's kind of what we want in conservation. Even the colors of his face seem to be a bit brighter, his shirt a bit crisper. And of course, all of the damage gone. The old skinning, retouched, reintegrated, much more delicately, much more sensitively, and much more appropriately. All of the dents and distortions have been removed. The painting is now flat. There are no distractions. And the tacking edge is free from wax and fiberglass and staples. Most importantly, the back is also free from wax and fiberglass. We can now see the original canvas. It is free to move, and it is free from all of that bad work that really shouldn't have been there in the first place. The keys are bound so they won't go anywhere, and they won't fall in between the canvas and make a dent. And one thing I noticed was that there was some pencil inscriptions on the back that had been completely covered by that old fiberglass lining. And using my infrared camera, I was able to suss out some of these pencil marks. And what I can see is, it says James Madis. And so my assumption is it is Madison. This is a portrait of James Madison. And now we know. When it came in, it looked okay, but not great. And after doing a lot of work on the back, stuff that is mostly unseen, the painting looks, the same, but better.